community was
And
affected.
see, back then,
Mhm.
it was kind of a taboo thing if you got divorced.
Mhm.
You know, we got married in the 60s, so back in the 60s, you know, and 70s, you know, people were starting to get divorced, but, you know, that was kind of rare. It was like, oh,
And
they're
see,
getting
back
divorced.
then, the wives were at home.
Yeah,
You didn't
True.
see very many. Now, down there at Clinton Corn, you never seen any. It was all men working down.
no women.
No women at all. But it was,
I would say it was a close-knit group because mother stayed home and you had your kids and you got together and had coffee once in a while and you know, nowadays people don't get together. That's one thing we've noticed.
I had
Nowadays.
the foreman that I was talking about, it was this Ray Carr, he was my foreman. I was working in my shop, and he came over to my shop, and it was about a week, was it a week or 2 weeks later? And he says, I want you to come along with me. He says, I'm going to get you hired, salaried at Clinton Corn. And I says to him, I says, me going down there working salary, I says, my application's down there. I says, I've worked 12 and a half years down there, never missed a day in 12 and a half years. I says, if they want me to work, they can call me. But I had, you know, things like that, you know, and the different ones, and then I had people that would call up and ask questions and stuff like this. Even when that was going on, they had people going in to work when they were out on strike. I had one friend that worked down there, had 35 years, was on, worked straight days, got off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, went home, come back to work 7 o'clock in the morning, pulled in a parking lot, and seen picketers. Went over and says, what's going on? And the company took pictures of him, and he lost his job because of it. That's how it was. They were out to break the union, and they done a real good job doing it. But
one thing I could say, I think it was probably a close-knit town in a way. It's a blue-collar town. But one day I said to him, don't you miss working there? And he said, no, I miss the guys.
but
And the guys didn't come around, and I
around.
think
they
it's
felt,
like they felt guilty. Those that didn't lose their job, they were still working,
Yeah.
and they couldn't bring themselves to stop by and visit
Just
him.
talk
And so
to
he
me,
missed
yeah.
the men.
Yeah, that's what
You
that was my
know.
next question was going to ask about, you know, people that kept their jobs and wanted to keep working versus some of the, like, major union players that like, hated the company so much that they refused to work. Or, like, did you lose a lot of friends because of that?
well, I didn't lose any friends. I can remember one time, and there was a German guy that was working down there. I knew he was, and he came up to me one time. It was at Riverboat Days, and he says to me, he says, Larry, he says, you know something? He says, we let you down. I'll never forget it. Sorry. But, you know, you just got to go on. But I went ahead and seen this here, and I never forget that. Just like
We don't talk about it very much though anymore. That's why I was hesitant to come. Because I thought, oh, this opens up a can of worms.
Oh, yeah. I understand.
But maybe it's good to talk to younger people about how
Yeah.
life was
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
then. You know.
Going off that, and you said you were one of the older, more qualified people. What can you explain to me about how the company was taking away seniority and firing like people like that, and like forcing overtime for other workers.
Well,
and, like,
that was
how
later.
aggressive-
That was later on.
Was that when
That was later
ADM
on,
probably
I think.
took over, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
I think when ADM came in, didn't everyone get fired and then
they
rehired?
rehired.
Right.
And they all lost their seniority.
Mhm.
But see, you went by seniority down. The oldest ones had, you're right, if you operated a job, the oldest one has the choice, you bid on jobs, and that was your job. The better jobs, the oldest men that was worked down there had it, and that's how they went by seniority. And that's how it was with my job. On my shift, I had a certain job, and like I said, I was the oldest qualified man on that job running it, and then I had two other qualified guys that could have replaced me and everything. But,
I think he wants to know how you got qualified. Is that part of your question?
Well, yeah, that kind of
I
goes
mean, you
back
didn't-
to like
you
your
didn't go to
specific
school.
jobs, but-
well, what they do is if you wanted to run a job, they would put you through a
Training?
training period for a certain length of time until you knew that job real well. And then you would, that's how you would work. And the biggest percentage of the people that was working down there, if they wanted to, there was probably maybe 20 or 30 jobs down there. And you would say, hey, I want to learn how to run that.
Mhm.
Well, that's how they would do it. You'd have a qualified certain amount of time on a job to learn how to run it.
Mhm.
I have a question. Do you have other family members that worked for Clinton?
Okay,
or
my
that type of
my
relationship?
whole family
Your whole
worked
family.
down there at one time. It was, when you worked at Clinton Corn, it was almost like a family. My dad had worked there at one time. I had brothers that worked down there. I had brother-in-laws that worked down there. I had a nephew, and my one brother was a supervisor down there, and they, shortly after we all had got fired and stuff like this, they wanted him to treat people different, and he says no. He says you've let a lot of good people go. And I had heard later on that they wanted to bring some of the people back, but the union says either you take them all back. See, they didn't want the people that was on the executive board or on the union board. They didn't want them back, but they said either you take them all back or none at all. Well, they never. That's how it was. We never was able to go back then that way. But it, some ways I look at it right now, it's probably the best thing that ever happened. It really was, because
What was the reason?
it was hard, very, very hard. And I just made up my mind, and she did too. There was no way
Well,
that
we weren't gonna lose our
we
house.
wasn't going to lose our house or nothing. But we took everything to get what we had. It's still, it's still a kind of a sore subject when you start talking about it. Okay.
Did you, back with the families, like, so you wanted to stay, and I'm sure there was other strikers that would be upset that, like, people wanted to stay and work for their job even though the company was being so aggressive. And with the family aspect, we've heard stories about how like families were split apart because of opinions of the strikers. And we were wondering if that had any effect with you.
Well, I know one thing. You interviewed Bob Kronovich. Bob Kronovich said that he was not gonna work down there. He quit. And,
But he wasn't part of our family.
he wasn't a part of the family, but it's just,
By the time, well, your dad had already passed away, hadn't he?
yes.
When you lost your job, and there weren't that many family members. Was
When it got down to it, the whole family was gone.
Mm-hmm.
It just started, even my nephew worked down there, and when ADM took over, they just,
yeah, I think
What-
his nephew quit.
the
and
whole
went to,
family was gone.
Alcoa,
but
so.
that place there, it was fun to go to work because it was like family.
Mm-hmm.
But I had heard later on, after ADM took over, that it was not the same, and they just go from day to day on it too.
Well, then they started working 12-hour shifts.
12-hour shifts down
Yeah.
there and that, so, see, I don't know anything about that because I
Yeah,
didn't
I
ever
wasn't
work
down
there.
Your time there was before.
But I,
that.
what I got a kick out of, I had 5 weeks, I think it was 5 weeks after this happened to me, Clinton Corn called me up, and they were calling the upholstery shop, and they wanted, how many
Some
chairs?
chairs done or something.
I don't know how many chairs it was, and she says to me, "What are you gonna do?" I says, "I'm
You're
going
not
down."
going down there, are you?
I says, "I'm going down there." I went down there, talked to the guy, they picked the fabric out, give him the price, now listen, give him the price, and I kind of chuckled a little bit, and I says, "I've got to tell you something." I says, "I was one of the 45 guys." He looked at me and he says, "That shouldn't have nothing to do with it." Well, I never got the job.
Mm.
But what was funny about the whole thing, the man that I learned this from, they called him up. And they said to him, "Why didn't you give him the job?" And they started hesitating a little bit. And this guy had been in it for upholstering for over 50 years. And he says to him, he says, "If you don't give him the job, you ain't gonna get it done." He says, "All of us are family." And they ended out having to take it on the other side of Iowa City to get it done. They wouldn't have it, that nobody would do it. But different things like that
Mhm.
happen. But it was a rough time. It really was, because I was just lucky enough, like I said before, that I had a family and I had people. I even had my one brother says to me one time, and he had worked down in Clinton Corn. He came to me and he says, "I'd like to buy you a half beef for," and I says, "No." I says, "I don't want anything like that." We made it on our own.
Yep.
And
We
it's-
did.
It was
Well, if we wouldn't have had the upholstering, we probably would have sold the house and moved.
we would have to move. And there was people that
Yeah,
did sell their
that were
homes.
moving.
Like I said, there was divorces and stuff like this too.
Mhm.
But I still got friends that I run into and that went through the same thing as I did. But it's the past. We just let it go now and forget about it. Is there any other questions you want?
Kind of just going off what you said with like people helping each other out. Did you see a lot of that in the community, like communities helping out the people that had lost their jobs because
I
they were
had
to have sold their
I
house?
had different ones. I can remember one time. It was an operator, and was it Olson that worked down there, brought kids'
Oh.
clothes
Oh,
over,
and a turkey.
and a turkey, food,
yeah.
stuff like
Did
that. And I had a neighbors would.
Yeah, a next door neighbor would bring over food once in a while, but I can't really say there was any organization that helped us out, the 45, like United
Mhm.
Way or whatever, or, there
Just
was
a sense
nothing,
of
Nothing
community.
there was
like
nothing like that. Mm-mm.
Can we talk a little bit more about some of the events that happened during the strike? Like maybe the Labor Day riot or Angela Davis visiting, or basically any events during the strike that you can remember?
Well, I
Do
know,
you remember?
I can remember the one during the strike. They had people coming in to replace them and everything like that, and they were busting windshields and everything down there. And but other than that, I don't know too much about it. Other, you know, I went with the union and stuff like this. It's just, you know, I don't know too much about it now.
Well, and just quickly to clarify, so a lot of the stuff that he had mentioned, that was part of the 79-80 strike, you know, where the Local 6 was decertified
Yeah.
finally. And so it was kind of, a lot of what we've heard from other interviewees was that what happened in 75 was kind of a precursor to the things
Yes,
that happened in
that's right.
79 and 80.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the question I would have then, you said you had been with the company, with Clinton Corn, for about 12 years?
12 years.
By 75. So what do you think had changed between the relationship between the union and the employees and management, the company? What changed during that time? Because there had
Between
been other
75
strikes.
and 79?
Well, prior to 75, actually,
Yeah,
up to
12
that
years
that
prior
while.
to 75.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I really don't know why
All
they
I
wanted to get
know
rid of
is
the
I
union.
had talked to different ones that worked down there after ADM worked down there, and they said that they, you know, they used to, if you would run a job down there, you would just run the one job. But they ended up putting a bunch of jobs and cut it down from 35, I think it was 35 a shift. Now I see that ADM has got on a shift 9 people running the whole thing. Other than that,
I don't know what difference there would be. In other words, you're saying why did they?
If there was a change, because you know the impression that I've got just from reading about this and talking to other people, you know, there had been strikes and there had been some, you know, kind of this back and forth between the union and the company for a number of years, and there were things in
Oh, yeah.
1968, 1971.
yeah,
And-
they had strikes there for like raises.
Right.
Now you know you talk about big raises. If I could see 5 cents an hour we get. When I first started down there, I was making $2.09 an hour. $2.09 an hour. My dad worked down there at 64 cents an hour. That's way back.
But everything was so much cheaper.
But it, you know, just like we were talking, we could go out with $15 and buy enough meat for
Or groceries.
groceries for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we used to allow $30 a paycheck for groceries. He got paid every 2 weeks. So
But
buy
you,
baby formula with that, you know.
but you know, like when I was like in high school and that, you could buy a Pepsi Cola for 7 cents, and it was 2 cents for the bottle. Went to the show for 10 cents, and you had 2 movies and a cartoon. So that's the difference, you know. But other than what you're talking about, all I heard is from different people that had been working after I left. So I like my wife said, I didn't miss the job. But there was times there that I would be just staring out the window. Miss the
Well, you
people.
were worried.
It
You
was
were
ju-
probably
and I was
worried if you
worried
could pay the
about
bills.
how are we going to get these. But it worked out real well for us. We ended out, and I'm probably better off now than what I would have
Yeah.
been if I was still staying down. It was still working. Well, I wouldn't be working down there now,
No.
but
But in a town like Clinton, where else would you work? I mean, you either had Clinton Corn or you had DuPont.
Mhm.
So